يعني سبيوزنا كم اللي عباد ورقلهم لبروا أويك بوف فيربون هاتوا أتعلم من الدواء طبعا أويك جينا بيه اشتري هي بكات تمام كات موبايل كده ده أتعلم أسمع شيء الدواء شو كده كانت المحاضرة يا لما دموا interruption قبول ليا إما عارفين نشتغل فيه يعني communication skill يعني مهارات يعني شيء بيكون لقل خلقاني دلوقتي. Okay, so communication skill in medical education, which is an integrated approach. خويا communication skill موضوعي كي كاراديك كازيا أما هذا مجال الطبانية when we are communicating with our friends, with our family, with the surrounding. So we have to have a skill how to communicate with the surrounding so that the communication will be effective. Okay? This module supposed to be 12 weeks. These are the topics, the introduction, which we will discuss today. They are illness, behavior, communication cycle, verbal communication, non-verbal, and doctor-patient relationship, breaking bad news, consultation model, reinforcement, and then the assessment and the final. These are the topics that you will take during the next maybe 10 weeks. I don't know how many weeks remain in the academic year. اليوم بدنا نزحمنا به. شيء يقصى كاب شيء تدروا شو قبولي ناكم. So these are the topics. Each topic you will take it in a different session theoretically, and then you will practice on that topic. We say communication skill is a skill that is needed and can be applied in every aspect of life to communicate with the surrounding. We, as a physicians, as a doctors, we have to have this skill to communicate with our patient, to communicate with the caregiver for the patient or the relative of the patient, to communicate with our colleagues and peers, and to communicate with the outside, with the organizations, with the advertisement department, with the governmental, and so on. We concentrate on communication with the patient. When we communicate with the patient, we interview the patient. This is called medical interview. Each medical interview has it is a frame. It will start with initiating the session. When a patient visits me during this interview, I have to have a background how I run this session with the patient. So we'll start with I have to know how to initiate the session and how to take and gather information from the patient, then how to do a physical examination of this patient, because it's also a special skill, needs special skill. Then explanation and planning, how I give information back to the patient, and then closing the session. So this is generally the frame. You will take it in detail in patient-doctor relationship. So communication is an important skill we all need to acquire early in life to converse with the world around us or surrounding us. Evidently, as adult and healthcare practitioner, we continue to refine this skill. Our skill من أمثالنا صار كتير experience جديدة. So I will refine my skill according to the needs and to communicate more effectively with my patients, with my students, with my friends, and so on. It opens the gate of understanding, and better we understand our patient, more effectively we can diagnose and we can treat them. Lack of communication has been the root cause of unsafe, tragic, and unsatisfactory healthcare practice, so let's communicate better to avoid the easily avoidable matter. زۆربەی زۆری جاری مشکلەکان لە بینی نەخۆش و دکتۆرە کە ڕوئە کێشەکەوەیە کە کۆمیونیکیشن سکیلی دکتۆرەکە لاواز بێت کێشە دروستە بێت ناتوانێت باش مانیجمنتی نەخۆشەکە بکات کە بەرەو سەیرەکەی دوات ئەو ناڕازیە بێت سەرفیسی کە تەقدیمی کراوە لەوانێ بێتە بۆی عاجزی یان شکات لێکردن. Why we teach communication skill? Because it's important to have this skill and to communicate effectively with the surrounding. Can we teach and learn communication skill? Yes, there are a lot of evidence that even if you don't have a special skill, now you are in your beginning in this long journey through the medical professionalism. You may not have skill for clinical examination or for communication with patient, but you can be taught. We can teach you how to communicate effectively. And this will remain and will be refined continuously, so you will develop your skills. And there are a lot of evidence and studies which prove that this communication skill can positively affect the result of the diagnosis, management of patients. So, there are three components in the communications. The first one is the knowledge. When you communicate with your patient, you should have knowledge, okay? The background information. So, at the end of this course, you, as a learner, should be able to explain the importance of effective communication skill and the need for patient-centered approach in the diagnosis and management of patient. چونکە جاران کە نەخۆشێکە چوو بۆ لای دکتۆرەکە دووسێ leading question لێکرد و یەکسەر عیلاجی هەنووسی. ئەمە doctor-based interviewer. No, the trend nowadays is patient-centered. So the patient is the source of the information. The patient has autonomy about his body. The patient should have right to protect his or her or information confidentially, and so on. So it should be a patient-centered. We should apply the framework of medical interview in gathering information. We should describe how the use of effective communication skill can enhance the doctor-patient relationship. We should apply understanding of the information, knowledge, capacity. You should know the anatomy, physiology, psychological function of symptom experienced by patient, and signs found by examination. You should be able to take a very good history from the patient and to do a physical examination. And you should be able to describe this integral role of information retrieval from the patient. And lastly, you should be able to describe ethical principle and value that underpin good medical practice. چونکە شتی قانونی، شتی ethical أخلاقية تبيشوا that later on you'll take the ethical aspect of medical professionalism. Then you should have skill. أما تو معلوماتك عن هي بس أبي مهارش هبة بس skill هبة لقلها. Skill to run a patient-centered approach. Skill to recognize and respond to the patient's emotion. You should have skill to gather information and give information to the patient. Perform examination, which is mostly a clinical examination. and also to demonstrate awareness of the ethical and legal concept. And lastly, the attitude. This is also a very important part. We as a doctor, when we are managing patient, we should have a positive attitude about the patient, about the medical professionalism. Then we can diagnose and treat patients. So we have to have appropriate professional behavior, unconditional positive regard for patient and their carriers, and for our colleagues, of course. We should have will to work with and learn from patients with diverse background and personal lifestyle, and a desire to support our colleagues in learning and personal development course component. يعني أبي attitude بكوري بشيء positive كا قول ولا فرقنا كم دبينينا خوشة. أبي positive أنا بيكمل لهم. أوكي من سعيم كله معلومات بس كتبوها الوضع أصلا الشيء كمل الحواري كمان. So you should have a positive attitude. من أقول لهم يعني بداخل مثلا للدكتور بيستوكا أقل ما براكسيكي كذبية بعمل كذبية وتمانع بوشي أوكي وتيجي أمي لا تهرب قبل. You as a medical professionalism, if you have this negative attitude, you will not be successful. Okay, so we have to have a positive attitude. So far, we learned that we need to teach and learn communication skill, which can be learned, and communication training makes a difference. أجر MSM حاضران بين وما training أنا بين حتما communication skill صار إذا زور بعشرة بالأسرع. We can define curriculum of communication skill define curriculum. أما توفيق كان أي خلال أما resource كان كمهم جديد يعني أما يعني skill for communication with patient. This is the author for clinical examination skill. Jan McCloy, Davison, our information candidate. And Ram's introduction to the symptom and sign. This is also useful to gain a clinical examination skill. تيكلا بله outcome يعني هدف ما شيء دويت إما كورسات بالدولين ولا ما يفتح فيها زوربي أو أنا كتشتغل لو سيخالي هكذا attitude ولا information وسكلا بس ما قلت بو هيك دواتر أجر خبري كنا عبرشة بين الرشيد الإنساني شو بيعمل يعني to communicate effectively with your patient in different situations. For more in breaking bad news, you should appraise the communication skill of others and yourself, of course. Importance of non-judgmental interview. Apply comprehensive consultation model. So, at the end, you should be able to communicate effectively with your patient, with your colleagues, and the surrounding. أمام مختصري أو كما كان. Okay? And course at the end of the semester, you will be exam tested in the communication skill. But as you know, communication skill is a skill. So examination will be more practical in the form of OSCE station. OSCE station. The station يكابي يكداني شلو وكنا خوش من كيدلهم how you start interview with this patient. And then I have a checklist to see your attitude, to see how you open the session, how you close the session, how is your skill in the clinical examination and so on. So you will be expected during the examination to demonstrate your ability to gather information from the patient and to give information to the patient. We gather information. بس معلوماتك ما بيقدر بعدين نخوشي كيسكا أي نوع من نخوشكا مثلا خبرك نخوشة نتيجة عمليات يا هشتكا. We are giving back information to the patient. You will not be expected to make diagnosis. يعني لما مرحلة من نامته بزاني تشخيصي نخوشكا شيء. بس أنا بزاني شون معاملة لقلاقي. And you'll be required to demonstrate clinical examination skill. For example, taking vital sign, for example, musculoskeletal examination, cardiovascular examination. لو أنا بجيت السيشن بس بنقول examine the blood pressure for this patient. This is a skill. And we have a checklist. When you perform any point, you will get positive mark for that. If you don't perform effectively, you will get negative mark for that part of the examination. وهنا لو أنا بنبدأ جوريا لو هيك الستيشن جوريا قال Mr. Ahmed is 48 years old and complaining of bleeding rectum for the last 2 months. His clinical assessment and investigation revealed carcinoma of colon. توم خبرك breaking bad news. شلون بقى أحمد علي كانت تجيب على سريع حطته سرطان الكولون. And you will be assessed in that station. أما نمونة و امتحانك مثلا ما مستعجل فورمة كيمياء على بزانم تولى مشتانة assessment. How you set up the interview, the patient perception, how you invite the patient to give information, how much information, knowledge you have, how your emotion and empathy with the patient, and then the strategy of the interview as a whole, and the summary or the closing session. The session. So this is a brief about the communication skill foundation course, and this module will continue with you throughout the 6 years study in the medical school, and thereafter you should continue developing and refining this skill so that you can be a successful doctor. Okay. Introduction to communication skill and cycle basically. When we want to understand communication, we want to understand the process necessary for effective communication between me and you, between me and my patient, to identify barriers and situations that can inhibit effective communication. Category communication, when I communicate with you, I have idea, I have information. I want to send this information to you, so I'm the sender. The message will be delivered to you, and you are the receiver. Okay, you are the receiver, and then the cycle should be completed by taking feedback from you, so that I have to make sure that the message is well understood by you. There, feedback should be, by this loop, we can complete the cycle of communication. So communication is the act of being understood. كاتب كشوما درواتو عالم communication باشبو ك نعم كم كان إيوليدي كشتو. This is what we mean by communication. The act of being understood is a process which involves sharing information between people through a continuous activity of speaking, listening, and understanding. Communication have verbal, non-verbal حركي نسا, رسمة كأي بينيد, and so on. Many ways of sending messages. Or it is giving, receiving, or exchange of information or idea by writing, verbally, non-verbally, or any combination of these, so that the material communicated is completely understood by everyone concerned. Basma, why this communication is important? Because it will lead to personal effectiveness. Communication skill I will be effective in delivering the topic to you. It helps to network with people, affect motivation for enhanced performance, build better understanding between boss and subordinate, create better interpersonal relation, increase listening ability, and so on. So it has many, many advantages. This is the cycle of communication. The source has a message. I have to encode this message, or information, or idea, كلمة، أبي encoding، ترجمة، جاء بو نسينا، بو قصير، بو حركة جسمه، بو هرجورك لنعمة. I have to encode it, and the message should be delivered through a channel, or channel. We have different channels. We will discuss it now. And then the receiver, you as a receiver, should decode this message. You receive it, and then you will do something which we call it feedback, so that the source knows that the message is received well and understood. Okay, so this is the cycle. What's involved first is the idea, which is the information exists in the mind of the sender. It can be a concept, an idea, an information, a feeling, whatever it is. Then the sender should encode this idea and the message is actual physical product from the source encoding. كاتقساكي أما messenger كاتشتنوسين أما messenger posture gesture معنوي. It's kind of message, and the message should be delivered through a channel. We have different type of channel, and the sender should have information about different type of channel, and should know which channel is the best way to deliver the message. يعني من أجل شتيك مهمة بتزان أما بفهم ما باشتري قامته يعني برسم يعني فيديو يجي بيشان مسجك مهي بو كوميونيتي أما للراديو كبس صوته باشتري يعني المقابلة تلفزيوني بيو رسمي كلامي لكوريكا باشتري يعني المقابلة and so on. These are the different type of channel: face-to-face interview, interactive TV high-speed connection, telephone, email, written correspondence, formal written message, public speaking, data report, and so on. So we have different channels for sending the message. Then the decoding process. Look at message decoding, which is the act of understanding the message, whether it's a word or a symbol. كاتيكاتور نعمل كاتيكاتور شتيك ولا لي يسموه تركيز كمصدر أو نقطة. Now there is a content. That's the Lacatian communication email. We have a content, which is actual word or symbol of the message, which is known as language, either spoken, written, and so on. أما content communication كيا information كان محاضرة كان content كيا context كا أو وضعية أو ظروفية كتوتيا ولا غير. The environment in which communication takes place, which can be formal, can be informal. Now we are in a formal environment. بەڵام ئەگەر لە کافتریایەک دانیشین و لەگەڵ یەکێکتانە دانیشن باسی ئەم مەوزوعە بکەین ئەوەیان ئینفۆرمەڵە. We should remember that a message is never communicated unless it is understood by the receiver. Question arises then, how do you know the message has been properly received? چۆن ئەزانم کە تۆ مەحاضەرەکە و بە مەزموتی وەرگرتووە مەسیجەکە وەرگرتووە ئەویش لە ڕێگەی فیدباکەوە. By two-way communication or by feedback. کە فیدباکیش زۆر جۆرێک لێتە خۆی. بۆ نمونە کاتێکە مەسیجەکە ئەنێری بۆ ڕیسیڤەرەکە وەریگرێت. یەکێک لەو ڕێگانەی کە ئەزانین کە وەریگرتووە و تێگەشتووە evaluation. He or she make a judgment about the word, about the goodness or appropriateness of the statement. کە من شتێکەڵێ وەڵێ سەرێکی بۆ لەکەنەوە وایە ئەو شتەکە تۆی لێ ڕاستە یان ڕاست نییە یان ئەوایە ئەزانی کە نامەکەی پێگەشتووە. Interpretation. ئەڵێم ئەزانی فڵان کەس باشە تۆ ڕستەکەی من ئەڵێیتەوە بە پارافرێزینگ بە شێوازێکی تر جارێکی تر دووبارەیەکەیتەوە attempting to explain what the sender statement means. ئەم دووبارەکردنەوەی تۆ بە شێوازێکی تر بە پارافرێزین ئەزانم کە شتەکەت وەردەگرتووە و تەکیدێک لە من ئەکەیتەوە کە وەرێگرتووە. Supporting the idea. کە من ئەڵێم فڵان کەس باشە ئەڵێ ئەوە ئەزانی ئەو ڕۆژە موقفێکی ئاوا باشی تری هەبوو کەواتە نامەکە وەرگرتووە. Probing. پرسیارکردن. یعنی ئەو بەشە وەرگرت پرسیارەکە بۆی کە بەشەکانی تریشی وەرگرێت. And understanding, attempting to discover completely what the sender means by her statement. So this is the cycle, and the last part of the cycle is the feedback, which we take from the receiver, and it has different type. Through different type of feedbacks, we can make sure that the communication was effective. یەکێک لەو بارێرانەی کە ئەم کۆمیونیکیشنە لاوازکە نۆیزە. لەبەرەوەی ڕجانان قوڵمان نییە حەز ناکەم یەکێک لە بەرچاوانی تراتەریقم وە یا بیکەمە دەرەوە. قسە هەیە هەڵی لە بۆ دوای محاضەرە. تۆ هاتووی ئێستا ریسیڤەری ئەو مەسیجە وەرگریت. Sideway talks, noise are barrier for good communication. And we, or I don't allow, at least I don't allow any one of you to make me a bad or ineffective communication with my student. لەبەرەوە لە کۆنتێکستی ڕێسپێکت و ئەوەیە بیهێڵینەوە تەعاملکەین. وا مەکەن کە ریئاکشنمان هەبێ کە خۆش نەبێ بۆ ئێوە یان بۆ ئێوە. So, bad communication may be a result of noisy environment, may be a result of ambiguous symbols, كأجر سلايد كان واضح نبن وشكاني كمن يعلمون هنا واضح نية لمعنايا يعني للسبيل يعني محاضريك تقديمكي سيركي سبيلينكي spelling error resort it would affect the communication. Yeah, inattention. When you have not focusing on the subject or on the lecture, then it will be bad communication. encoding may be faulty because of the use of ambiguous symbols. Symbol يكفي مسج كاني كأينري. يعني أجر من مثلا نامية تبغى بنيرم نامك واضح نبي ambiguous أويك واضح نيا تيكاليك. So the goals or the aims of this lecture was, first of all, we have to know that there is something called communication cycle or process. Ka'alin communication process, aweka, a sender has an idea. This sender should encode the idea to a message and then transmit this message through a channel to the receiver, and the receiver should decode this message, understand it, receive it, and then give feedback so that we know that the message being understood by the receiver. أما لهمو communication. And communication skill, it's important for us as a human being in every aspect of life. Whether you are an employee or employer, you are a boss or subordinate, you are a student or a teacher or a merchant, you have to have a good communication skill. We as a medical practitioner, we should know this information and we should have a good communication skill to communicate first with our patient, then with our colleagues, peers, and the surrounding. Why? Because there are a lot of evidence that many problems between patient and physician arise from bad communication skills. And there are evidence that good and effective communication between the patient and the doctor has a better result in diagnosis of the conditions and in treatment of the conditions. كباسي communication شكل بدون نخوشة إيمن للسيتينيكا باسي communication كين كبيري medical interview جاء medical interviewer لا استشاري كدانيشتون يا لجولي طوارئ يا لعيادة يا لقاوش يا للرحمة يا لجولي سلام للخوشة wherever it is a medical interview. Okay, it has a frame. You as a medical professional should have this skill to know how to start and how to open the session with the patient. And you should have a skill how to take information from the patient. You should have a skill how to do physical examination. And then how you interpret these data which you gather from the patient, and then you reach the diagnosis, you have information, you have to tell back or send back this information to the patient. Discussing about his condition, the outcome, and so on. At the end, you should close this interview, end this interview with the closing session. بو أويك effectively أبي أمشتا لخياطة وأبي بزاني how to apply this basic information in different situations, whether the patient has a simple condition or you want to break bad news with the patient and so on. And we should know that always this interview or this communication has three elements. The first is the knowledge that we have. We have to have a knowledge about this communication, the cycle, anatomy, pathology, and so on. Then we should have skill. سيدي دكتوري واحد علمي الدنيا يفيد بس خلنا نشوف ولا بوجود السكيل أكيد how to communicate with but سيكي رتوا كان بروشكا يعني يختار البوكا خلنا نشوف ولا you should have the knowledge, you should have the skill for taking history, for doing clinical examination and so on, and then your attitude should be always positive about your professionality, about your patient, about the emotion of the patient. Okay? Do the pay it was a review of the whole lecture. And remember that this is only just an introduction to the module. From next week, you will start from the illness behavior. Someone else will come and you should master this information you took today so that next week you know how to act in a scenario of illness behavior with the patient. Okay?